And we are recording. If Zoom doesn't hate me enough, what it did to Dr. Bhargava and I yesterday, it is now trying to do it again. But enough of that. Dr. Robert Malone, best known for inventing the mRNA vaccine technology, but also a facial hair aficionado, as some people don't like to acknowledge, but the most interesting man in the world. Dr. Aditi Bhargava, who came on here last night and taught me all about mRNA technology, well, vaccine technology with caps and codons and inserting the mutations and all the different studies. Before we start, Dr. Bhargava, although you are a researcher at UCSF, nothing we say represents UCSF, and nothing I say represents Dr. Malone or Dr. Bhargava, because I'm an idiot and will surely manage to make a fool of myself within the next 51 minutes. But so, whereas the first episode with Dr. Malone, episode 495, he explained mRNA vaccine technology to me. And with episode 642 last night with Dr. Bhargava, who also explained it to me. So we've kind of laid the groundwork for what it is, and which I'm fine with. But as I first found with Dr. Bhargava on Aubrey Marcus's show, I mean, the opening clip saying it's not right to make people feel like they are in the wrong for being unvaccinated. And my whole thing is I'm open to all discussion. I was a biology major. I love science. What I'm not okay with are when the very people that invent these technologies or master them, as Dr. Bhargava said last night, you've been studying them for 30 years and you're still trying to get your head around it. Or when Dr. Malone is unpersoned by LinkedIn and he gets, vaporized by Twitter. Dr. Malone, what are your thoughts right now on, we have the Biden vaccine mandates shut down in all 50 states. New York now comes out with their Omicron mandates. And now we have the CEO of Pfizer and Dr. Fauci coming out saying that it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when 3 shots will now be the definition for fully vaccinated. Dr. Malone, where is this going? Is this going to stop, or are we on this road forever? And are enough people ever going to kind of are we going to keep shutting it down in court and saying, no, you cannot mandate people to put something in their body they don't want?
Okay. You're asking for the crystal ball.
Yes.
Which you like to do.
Yes.
My crystal ball is that Biden and Fauci are all in on this. They can't admit the error of their ways. I think that there is a whole lot of mass formation psychosis going on within the government officials and the media right now. Part of it is because they've been paid to be advocates for Pfizer. I mean, today I just posted the Washington Post article that is basically regurgitation of Pfizer talking points, and which, by the way, are based on the slimmest of data. But we had Biden totally buying in on it. I can't see, and as perhaps Aditi may not be attuned to. I've been traveling all over the world and certainly all over the United States. Just came back from Louisiana. There's a bunch of really angry mothers and parents and physicians and nurses over what's being done now. This is absolutely wrong. It is literally against the Nuremberg Code. It's against the common rule. It is absolutely against fundamental precepts of bioethics that we've all had to be trained in for years and years and years, and they don't care. I don't see anything. There's a position taken that Biden will or will not get reelected, or whoever his successor is, based on how he handles this. I'm of the opinion, and I think it's backed up by the recent election in Virginia, that the only way this is really going to change is with the midterms. And I think my crystal ball says wave election in the midterms. And then we're going to have the House and the Senate flipped. And we're not going to have these barriers to senators and congressmen holding real hearings. And I think that's the point when you see suddenly Mr. Fauci put his tail between his legs and scoot off. And I don't think it's going to happen before then. Right now, he's allowed to get away with lying and misrepresenting and slandering Ron Paul and Rand Paul and Ron Johnson and others, as gaslighting them rather than answering questions and dealing with the facts. So that's I think in the meantime, we have to hope for continued integrity on the part of our judiciary. So far, it's looking good, but that doesn't mean that that's going to continue. And I think that I don't think we're going to see them, the government, the current executive branch, backing off from this extremely aggressive position, which, by the way, there's multiple clip montages out where you've got Jen Psaki and Tony Fauci and the POTUS and multiple other government officials, Nancy Pelosi, saying that we're going to respect people's autonomy. There's no way we would ever do mandates, et cetera, and yet here we are. I'm sorry to be so glum, but I just don't see them stopping. They don't care about the rules. They don't, this latest headline that Pfizer now is doubling down and wants 75 years before they release their documents. I mean, this you talk about smell a rat. Why? What are they trying to hide?
It's a couple little things playing into each other, right? I mean, you have that kind of meme going around. What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and a headline? 4 to 6 months. And you have these little things about, wanting immunity, but then you kind of have these like meta themes of immunity. You have the chief of the EU, Ursula. You couldn't make this up. A German woman calling for the scrapping of the Nuremberg Code just a month after she met with the CEO of Pfizer. And it's Dr. Bhargava, what you walked me through last night is just, and you very professionally didn't take a side, didn't push a narrative. You just said, this is what's going on. And here's the proof that, certain things are being cherry picked and we're constructing this image out of, it's a number of data points. If I take the data points from Google Maps on an iPhone from 3 parked cars on a freeway in the middle of Montana, well, it looks like there's a traffic jam. But if I get 10 million data points from downtown Manhattan, you're going to see, mild here, gridlock there, freeway there. But if you really want to, and if you have nefarious and or financial incentives to do so, you can zoom in on one spot and say, there's traffic, or you can say, there's the open road. Dr. Bhargava, again, now I'm going to pass the crystal ball to you, as I do. Where do you see this going? You mean your interview with Arby Marcus was absolutely fantastic. Where do you see this going? Is there a critical mass that people have to hit? And again, as Dr. Malone said, I know it's the crystal ball. Hey, here's the world's problems, answer it. But what are your thoughts on this, Dr. Bhargava?
Thank you, Tommy. And Dr. Malone has pointed out some of the more political side of this, what's going on. Like I said, I have tried not to be political, but obviously the political decisions that are being made are affecting not just our professional lives, but also our personal lives, right? We've seen that. And for me personally, it's been very, very disappointing to see President Biden saying that he'll follow the science, but not actually following the science. It's just following politics. And even more disappointing is how Dr. Fauci is handling this, because definitely what he's doing is not science. So just like Robert pointed out, that, he doesn't have a crystal ball, but you can base some of it off of what's been happening or our past history. If we were to base that off the past history, we definitely know that if you, with most of the infectious diseases, that if you've had that disease, then you have an immunity that is unparalleled. And we've seen a blatant disregard of that from people like Dr. Fauci, insisting that people who even recovered from it needs to get vaccinated. So that's not following the science, right there. So similarly with this new Omicron variant, the South African physician who reported this, I mean, obviously the technician was pretty vigilant, but it also points out the flaws with the technology of RT-PCR in trying to detect it, given that they normally don't sequence the product. The cycles used are so many, there are many flaws with that. So just because they detected it in early November does not mean that this is when the variant emerged. So if the variant, at least initial sequence analysis says that there may be two different variants, and so they must, and that they diverge sometime from a common ancestor that existed way back in March of 2020, maybe perhaps sooner, maybe we haven't yet discovered more milder forms of this virus. So if we don't know when this first emerged and how many people actually have it, there's already some foregone conclusion that this is going to cause more problem. And based on some haphazard information, the mayor of New York has made that decision to have a shutdown or to pass new mandates forcing everyone to get vaccinated. Again, given that the boosters you're going to get are designed for the original version of the virus, there are so many, more than 25, 28 mutations in the new variant. I have no idea how that would give you protection. So there's so many things that are wrong and unscientific in this. Even the fact that they just take antibody levels as measures, which is, or neutralization antibody, which is only a very small part of how the virus gets, I mean, the virus gets into the cell, but once the virus gets into the cell, there are many other methods by which the cell tries to fight it. And all of that is being ignored, and we just go with this narrative of antibody, antibody, antibody. So definitely it's not about science. So if it's not about science and it's all about something else, politics, money, all of them are there. So if that's, and power, if that's in play, then it's very, I mean, only people can change. We still live in a democratic country. And definitely, I think we need a critical mass. I think we need legislative changes to not have complete protection for vaccine makers. We need to change, just like Dr. Fauci and others have changed the definition of vaccine. I think vaccine definition needs to be changed. Now we have a vaccine for Alzheimer's. Really? I mean, can you prevent, how does that work? You have vaccine for cancer. I mean, there are certain cancers, perhaps, they don't have the same etiology. So I think that needs to be changed. We cannot have complete immunity given to vaccine makers and then everybody trying to pass off their drug as vaccines now. So I think change has to come from people, and people, instead of being shamed, like I said, which is completely contrary to the liberal stance that they used to blame the other side. I feel ashamed that they are doing exactly the same thing that they were, in the past had blamed the other side of doing. So I think we have to realize that this is not the way to go. And given, again, so many unknowns about this vaccine, given that there are studies coming out that, vaccines have a very narrow way to prime your immune system. So is it also diverting your immune system's resources, especially in children and healthy young adults, and not allowing them to develop a full-fledged immune system and immune response? And that data comes a little bit from Public Health of England. They may have changed their name. And I don't know if that will see the light of the day, but it's definitely there on their weekly report that they put out. So I think it's just gotten to a point where it's no longer about science, and it's mostly become political, mostly become power play, mostly become, the narrative is controlled by the pharma. It's given out in form of press releases, not really data. That's, the data is not available for independent analysis. If they're going to take 75 years, I'm actually part of the group that has filed the lawsuit to get those documents released. So I think people, irrespective of your political affiliation, I think this is bigger than politics. We need to come together and stand up for what's wrong, which is the mandates are wrong. Yes, there may be a subset of people in which these vaccines have done some good, but again, I think the mRNA vaccines, I'm not so sure about, but definitely the classical vaccines, they may be more advantageous given the number of mutants that we are seeing.
Dr.
So
Malone?
sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, it was perfect. It was wonderful. Dr. Malone, any thoughts?
So I'm struck by Aditi's courage because she still maintains an academic position, whereas I have the freedom as a free living consultant to speak my mind. I'm really impressed that somebody with the senior appointment that she has at an institution like UCSF is willing to speak so frankly and freely. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that courage and thank her for being willing to speak her truth.
Oh yeah, no, it is. It's
Her point about vaccines with more diverse epitopes, let's say, that's fancy vaccine talk for different proteins. Sort of. So we're just about to post a fascinating interview that I did with a scientist from Chile, where they have a totally different policy. Their government in-licensed and obtained half a dozen vaccines, ran phase 3 clinical trials on each of them, made the data from those phase 3 trials available, and through a series of circumstances, allowed their public, and yes, they did really cross a line in terms of very active government advocacy that the populace take a vaccine, but they did not mandate them. That's a fact. They have not mandated them for children, and they're not attempting to. So there was a significant degree of free will. And through a series of circumstances, they first received the Coronavax, which is the Chinese whole inactivated vaccine, started deploying that. Then they started getting Pfizer, and the elections happened. And after Biden was sworn in, he made a decision. So there was a decision made. I would say Mr. Biden made it. Who knows? Maybe Tony made it. But a decision was made in the executive branch to no longer to stop the export of the Pfizer vaccine for a period of time. During that time, the Chilean people reached something a little south of 60% vaccine uptake, predominantly with the coronavac. There was a lot of criticism that coronavac wasn't working so well. But now there's fascinating data coming out. They have well over 90% uptake in the population, except for the pediatric cohort. And the outliers are the First Nations people of Chile, largely, who that's kind of a trend across the world, is First Nations people are very wary of these vaccines. And what they're seeing is with Delta, they're seeing, and the doctor will appreciate, I'm going to use the technical term, so they're having much lower cycle thresholds for detecting the virus in the Pfizer vaccinated than that have been infected than with the coronavac infected, which translates to, it's kind of, you have to do backflips in your mind. Higher cycle numbers means less virus. So the evidence is that because you're having to run the PCR test more time in order to detect that small amount of nucleic acid. So you have to kind of get in the groove here to understand the data. It's counterintuitive a little bit. But more cycle numbers means less virus load in the sample being tested for PCR. So bottom line is they're seeing shorter clinical durations with coronavac and less virus in the infected with Delta than they're seeing with Pfizer. So this is the traditional whole inactivated vaccine. Unfortunately, because of the geopolitics that comes out of China, but that's the experience in Chile right now. And this isn't widely recognized in the world, but it underscores your point. And I think the point that Aditi's making, which in part is that these genetic vaccines, which, let's just say it's a narrow antigen that's being presented. It's a mismatch in the sense of a classic flu vaccine. It's kind of akin to taking the flu vaccine from 2 years ago and hoping it protects against today. And as Aditi will probably tell you, because she's well versed in immunology, rejabbing someone repeatedly with an antigen has two potential outcomes other than the hoped for one. One is high zone tolerance, and the other one is a form of original antigenic sin, especially if you're reinforcing the differentiation of effector and memory cells that are driven by an antigen that's outdated. And then we have the actual clinical data that's rapidly coming out of South Africa. Remember that this was first detected in Botswana, and it was detected in 4 diplomats, all of whom were vaccinated, and they were travelers. So they were either boarding an airplane. I think they were boarding an airplane. Remember that Botswana has close ties with the People's Republic of China. And then just to say, and through a little more geopolitics on it that Dr. Tommy will appreciate, what the West did was lock down against the Southern African countries and put out all this press that it was somehow their fault, which was totally not grounded in data. We know now that this virus was already all over the world, and we really don't know where the heck it came from. That's the honest truth. I mean, if we were going to be honest with ourselves, what we would say is good on Botswana and Johannesburg, South Africa, for catching this thing when the rest of the world was asleep.
Yeah.
And we ought to be complimenting them, not isolating them diplomatically. But what we've done by doing that is to push them yet closer to the PRC and further away from the West. The geopolitics of this is absolutely horrid. It's like nobody's watching. It's like, is anybody at the State Department awake? And then, as she's pointing out, the underlying biology is just wrong. And WHO came out with a statement: don't keep jabbing people, no boosters until we figure out what's going on. that is the right scientific position, in my opinion. And yet we have a government that's doubling down, and various administrations that are getting even out ahead of the skis of Tony Fauci and Rochelle Walensky and saying, no, we're going to go ahead and insist on everybody taking the jab. I think what's going on in New York City is fear. I think that the street and the common New Yorker, and I know this because I testified before the rabbinical court up in New York City for the Hasidic Jews. And one of the things I learned was there's a lot of deeply traumatized physicians in New York City that went through that first wave and they're still having nightmares. I think that New York City right now is reacting out of fear. I think that's the best way to explain what's going on. And I think that there's a lot of fear on Wall Street right now about all kinds of stuff. And I think they're grossly overreacting. But, you know, I think that's the most charitable explanation I can give. Fortunately, there's a new mayor coming in, and I'm going to learn more about the politics of that this weekend when I go to Puerto Rico, because one of the people I'll be meeting with was one of his major backers. So I should have some pretty good insight into whether we're going to see a sea change with the incoming mayor pretty soon. But I completely concur with Aditi that we're way beyond the science, as Tony would say. You know, and of course, Tony never recognizes the fact that science is always a dynamic tension. We're constantly bickering and arguing and testing hypotheses and adjusting our position. If we're good scientists, right? If we're good scientists, we freely acknowledge we don't know the answer. You know, that's the nature of the beast. Is we are groping around in the world of the unknown, trying to discern meaning. That's our job. As scientists, that's fundamentally what we do. And this logic that, you know, Tony or Rachel or whatever, they don't say, oh, I'm gazing into the crystal ball and this is pure speculation. They say it as fact, and then they have to flip-flop. So I just want to close by, again, expressing my appreciation and respect for a full professor at UCSF speaking truth in these difficult times. And I'll finish on that.
Dr. Bhargava?
Well, thank you both. I mean, if there is no science left, what's the point, right? Well, what do we do with these titles? And obviously, funding has become very hard. Funding was anyway hard for me for the reason that I sort of pointed out yesterday, that I don't believe in only putting out positive findings. I think negative findings are a key part of your data, and that puts out a whole picture. And unfortunately, publications or most scientific community does not like to hear about negative data. And I think that's why we, in some ways, haven't made that progress that we should have made, is because of lack of negative data. If you only have positive data points, there's only that much you can do. So it is what it is. It's if I have to quit science, it'll be at least on a high note and not on a low note in some ways. At least people know what good science should be. So having said that, I think to what Rob, you're saying, there's actually data also coming out from Thailand that also used CoronaVac. There was a recent publication in the Lancet, and they also compared people who had the CoronaVac to the naturally immune. And I was pleased to see in this Lancet publication that that they were allowed to at least say that the natural immunity was far more superior, and that the samples taken from naturally immune, they had a last year's cohort, that is the 2020 cohort, and a this year 2021 March-April cohort, compared to the vaccine cohort. And they found that, like you said, Rob, that the samples from the newer cohort of naturally infected people neutralize many more variants than and the Delta variant much more effectively. And irrespective of when you were infected, you were far more better at neutralizing the viral uptake compared to the vaccinated. So definitely, if you, again, this was the CoronaVac, so inactivated. They did not have a comparison with Pfizer or any other, but I'll come to and elaborate a little bit more on those flaws. And then there are other countries that are using the CoronaVac or some other inactivated virus version. And then, of course, in India as well, they have the Covaxin, which is also an activated virus, but that distribution is much less than, I think it's called Covishield, which is the AstraZeneca version, and that is pushed far more than the inactivated virus one. So in terms of boosting and reboosting, and as we talked about that, when you, first of all, as we know that if you had natural infection, over time, your antibodies will go away. So I had chickenpox when I was young. And if you were to look at my blood sample now, I will probably not have any detectable antibodies. But if I were to be re-exposed to chickenpox virus, my body will very quickly generate those antibodies. So having antibody levels or undetectable antibody levels in face of a prior infection, or even if it was a good vaccine, means nothing. You can't use antibody titers or antibody levels many, many months after infection to then compare that to people who've been vaccinated 2 weeks ago and then say, oh, look, they have such high antibody titers, whereas you were infected 2 years ago, you don't, so you are not protected. I really don't understand where that comes from. I don't understand how somebody who claims to be the top infectious disease person or immunologist can say that and get away with it, and the scientific community just sits and takes it. So, and I've put a blog out saying the vaccines are like emperor's new clothes, right? So it's, I don't know why the scientific community does not call that out, or why people who haven't, so that's one part. And the second part is that when you have repeated antibody or consistently high antibody levels, that is actually a signal to your immune system that there's something wrong, right? You make antibodies only in presence of a persistent infection. So if you keep boosting and producing the same antibody, at some point your immune cells will attack that and make antibodies to that antibody. And that's the case you see in biologic therapeutics such as Humira, which is an anti-alpha antibody treatment for IBD, Crohn's disease, and some other rheumatoid arthritis kind of diseases. And in that scenario, within a few months, 40% of the patients become refractile. What that means is that 40% of the patients then do not respond to the antibody treatment because their bodies have made antibodies to anti-TNF-alpha. So again, this is very contradictory to what we know about immunology, to have you be boosted again and again and make antibodies to the same protein or the same virus even. So I'm not really also in favor of taking yearly flu vaccines. You know, if you had flu, again, you're probably protected for a certain number of years. You don't need to take the flu vaccine. And again, there may be a cumulative effect of, maybe if we were to just put that in perspective, if somebody's been exposed to, let's say, 10 different infectious disease agents, and we were constantly making antibodies against them, even after those agents have been cleared from our body, then imagine the chaos there, right? So it doesn't happen like that. Immunology doesn't work like that. That's why we have these memory cells that are very low in numbers, and you may not detect them. But when they see the same pathogen invading again, they are so good at multiplying at such fast level that, it's mind-boggling. I mean, how our immune systems work. And to then completely ignore that and keep going on about vaccines for everything under the sun is just not the right way to go.
Dr. Malone.
I salute Aditi. Well spoken and bravely spoken. It's been pointed out in the scenario that she's talking about, if in fact we did have chronic maintenance of high titer antibodies, our blood would turn to sludge. We would have a massive amount of extra protein in blood. It's just not physiologic. She mentioned, I was waiting whether or not she was going to say the magic words of memory cells, and she did. The other part that she's gently downplaying is, of course, T cell immunity, and T cells also have their own memory compartments. I personally believe that what we should be measuring and what could, let me put it this way. There is a paradox, a conundrum in what is occurring with these mRNA vaccines. The durability is horrid. And we don't, because the durability is not just that the titers are waning, the effectiveness is waning. That's clear. And part of that seems to be the generation of escape mutants, as Gert Van den Bosch has been suggesting in warning us about. Fortunately, we don't seem to be seeing the development of more pathogenic strains. We do seem to see the development of more highly infectious and highly replicative strains. And the fancy word for that is we seem to be seeing higher burst sizes, which, by the way, is a crucial variable for the new Merck drug, molnupiravir. Molnupiravir appears to be less effective when we have large burst sizes, and it appears from the preliminary data that Omicron may be producing even larger burst sizes than Delta. So, but one of the things that was most worrisome to me, and I've been watching this carefully and talking to buddies like Andy DeGroot at Epivax that have computational tools for looking at T cell epitope evolution, is they've been saying, the T cell folks have been saying, no, we're not seeing evolutionary selection to escape T epitopes. But I forget her name, the leading scientist down in South Africa. And I just, an aside on that, there's been a massive investment in immunology in South Africa consequent to HIV disease and HIV biology and tuberculosis, etc. There's sometimes a sense in some people that South Africa is a backwater. In terms of immunology and science and molecular virology, that is absolutely not the case. These are excellent scientists down there. So there's some speculation by one of those scientists that she's seeing evidence of T epitope escape with the Omicron variant. Now, what I have advocated and still do is that we should be tracking the durability of the memory cell populations and their decline, which is a normal way to project durability of vaccines. And the few papers that I've seen on this suggest that there's a decline in the naturally immune, which is significantly slower than that more rapid decline that's observed with the genetic vaccines expressing the spike protein. Now, the fly in the ointment of all of this is the observation in multiple manuscripts. And it goes back to the very earliest days of the outbreak when the excellent team at Emory were reporting, quote, neutralizing antibodies. And Dr. Aditi will tell us that that concept of neutralizing antibody in and of itself is artificial and has kind of been, the validity of that as a measure of protective activity has been called into serious question these days, particularly by the monoclonal antibody people. But what was observed in Rafi Ahmed and the other leading immunologists at Emory and vaccinologists early on, like March 2020, was that they were detecting neutralizing antibodies in T effector populations, so cytotoxic T lymphocytes, that were coming up at about 14 days. Now, Aditi will tell you that this is the clear hallmark of a recall response in which memory cells are being activated, memory cells that were trained by prior coronavirus infection. Oh, well, do we have circulating SARS-1 and SARS-2 that has infected all of us? No, we had circulating beta coronaviruses. And this gets to this complicated, but really not so complicated idea of original antigenic sin that I think, and some others like Ryan Cole concur with this thought thread, unproven, that what we may be observing with the poor durability is the consequences of original antigenic sin due to priming from the prior exposure to circulating beta coronaviruses, cold viruses. And they have trained a memory cell population, since we're talking about high immunology now. So Aditi, I look forward to your thoughts on this, but there's a train of thought that what is going on is original antigenic sin effects consequent to the circulating beta coronavirus for a lot of these epitopes. And the fact that you're seeing the titers come up at 14 days is clear evidence that we have pre-existing immunity against numerous cross-reactive epitopes. And she mentioned, and I was a little stunned to hear her say this, because this is, I've been fired from 2 different jobs in influenza vaccine manufacturers for raising the issue that one should not over-vaccinate with flu because of exactly these problems, and yet she came right out and boldly made the point. Good on her. So I think there's a chance that what we're seeing is the consequences of original antigenic sin and priming with the other beta coronaviruses that are skewing the responses to the vaccine and resulting in poor durability of memory cell populations that are more specific. And we would have that answer resolved by now if the good Dr. Fauci would direct adequate funding to folks like Aditi to do the real science that needs to be done and the real immunology, as opposed to kind of the smoke and mirror yes men that seem to dominate his funding portfolio. And I'm getting political again. So there's my thoughts on that, Dr. Tommy.
Well, thank you. And I told you she was awesome. I told you she was awesome. And yeah, Dr. Malone, you said you get political. But the reality is it's become so large that I don't think it can be adequately extricated from politics. You can't talk about 80 years ago, 2 days ago as Pearl Harbor. You can't talk about FDR and Pearl Harbor without talking about the entire world. It has become this. But
Well, I did help edit Bobby's book.
oh, you did?
I have dealt with Dr. Fauci my whole career, and I've watched him break the rules that if I broke, I would be excommunicated. I'd never be able to run a clinical trial again.
Yeah.
But he does it with impunity.
Yeah.
So that's just for most of us, it's just kind of been an accepted truth that Tony can do stuff that nobody else, he gets away with stuff that nobody else can. And the why of that is I think amazingly well documented by Bobby Kennedy's book. And I'm not getting a nickel from that, so don't think that I'm pumping something because I'm going to get revenue from it. But he just killed himself. He hardly saw his family. He worked himself to the bone to build that book and build in all of those citations and footnotes. And if your viewers want to understand the how and the why of why we got to this point, where the person who is setting public policy controls the money. And so anybody like Aditi who speaks out in contrast to his official explanation for what's going on here, he will retaliate against. There's a long, rich history of that. And Aditi lives just down the road from Dr. Peter Duisberg, just to give one very egregious example, who is from Berkeley.
Dr. Bhargava?
Well, the reason I joined, or science fascinated me from the very beginning, was that you could actually state the facts without, call spade a spade and not have to worry about it. But of course, it has not been like that. And yes, I mean, I have, like I said before, I have stood up for things which I've already paid the price for. So I have given up on NIH funding. So that's that. And before Dr. Malone goes, I actually wanted to say that I pulled up your 1989 PNAS paper, and so for people who don't know, PNAS is published by the National Academy of Sciences, and it used to be difficult to, it probably still is difficult to get PNAS publication, but I think that paper is so simple and elegant in that for the first time they were showing that when you put a cap on this mRNA, because we were discussing on this mRNA technology, is that how essential that cap is for the mRNA to be translated and make a protein. And they've done various different things to the mRNA and shown, and I'm not sure if you looked at the poly-A size in that, but the poly-A tail size.
Actually, so yeah, so as you point out, thank you, that's very kind. It clearly demonstrated the importance of polyadenylation, 5' untranslated and 3' untranslated, and cap in a very simple set of experiments. And I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Judy White of UCSF, who played a key role in enabling me to gain access to the necessary sequences that I combined in different ways. Another one, just to, people don't realize it, that work, that was the first work that really extensively used the luciferase reporter protein for statistical analysis and reproducibility. Before that, it was all chloramphenylacetyl-transferase. And it was just the consequence of me having done a rotation in Suresh Subramani's lab right as he published the initial paper on using luciferase as a reporter gene. So that paper, and then I invite you at your leisure, since you're an expert in mRNA, to take a journey down memory lane and look at the 9 issued patents from that era. that Vical and Merck use very effectively.
Some of your coverage that happened in Nature, they put out a whole thing with your handwritten notes scanned in there. But so the reason that I bring this up is important because the cap and the poly-A tail both are extremely sensitive structures and very important for the integrity of mRNA to be translated. Now, of course, when we have mRNA being made in our cells, whether you're looking at cell line, in vitro or in vivo, there are mechanisms, multiple enzymes, multiple proteins that get associated and provide stability, which is not the case for the mRNA being given for the vaccine. So, and as shown in that PNAS paper by Dr. Malone, that if the cap is not there, you get very poor translation, right? So we don't have that data that how many people are actually getting a full integral mRNA vaccine, how many are actually making protein that correlates with that. So there are many issues. So I wanted to say that that was a really fascinating paper, and I actually prefer older papers because they give the method properly rather than you having to go find in supplemental data, and then in the supplemental data these days you can't find methods to reproduce, but very clearly in that paper there is the whole methodology, and if you wanted to do it and replicate in your lab, you could do that, which is not possible these days with most of the papers published in Nature Cell Science and PNAS including. So the T cell story, it's really interesting because most people don't mention the role of thymus. Now, without thymus, you don't get T cell education. So T cells that are made from, or the stem cells that are made in the bone marrow, for the T cells to get matured and get the education, which is either exposure to the pathogen or whatever non-self antigen happens in the thymus. And thymus is this, I've called this, it's like worse than getting into an Ivy League school. That education process is a complete black box. I mean, we understand the steps that are there, but we don't understand which T cell gets selected and how it gets selected to be educated and comes out as a fully educated, either a T helper or a T memory or a T cytotoxic cell. So that process is still a mystery. So why is thymus so important? Because the T cell, like you said, in terms of previous coronaviruses having given that memory, the thymus function deteriorates as we age. And it's best in kids, it's best in young adolescents and teens, and as we age, in most people, in humans, thymus involutes, or it's called shrinking of the thymus. And that doesn't happen in animals. So obviously the data that we get from animals has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because animals' thymus they are constantly training the T cells, whereas human thymus does not, that function decreases as we age. So, and it's a very precipitous drop. So, so of course, that's why people who are younger, if they are exposed, then they will have a different kind of T memory. And if you're only looking at adults, then you can't compare their memory, and they may not have any T memory cells activated. And that's why you may be seeing that escape, because in a lot of people, older people, the thymus may not be educating the T cells. So, and the other thing that really affects thymus function is stress. So even in animals whose thymus does not involute, if we stress them, and we've shown, published that repeated stress will shrink their thymus, will also change their spleen size, and the T to B cell ratio is affected. So of course, when you get an infection, that's a stressor, but not the kind of stressors that we live in these days. Of course, everything is a huge stressor. So perhaps even the thymic function and our splenic functions are compromised because of other kind of stressors, especially in adults and children who are in some ways still have that, that freedom to enjoy their thymic function and spleen function is robust, and we shouldn't be depriving them and giving them this very narrow education with unnecessary vaccines. There are vaccines that are, I think, absolutely essential, but still, in principle, I don't agree with mandates. I think I've survived chickenpox, I've survived typhoid. I was telling Tommy yesterday I had a relapse because I couldn't take the medication. The capsules were too big and too bitter. And so I would go and flush them down the toilet and had a relapse. So my immune system must have been really good to have survived a relapse of typhoid. And typhoid I was delirious. And in that stage, you can get myocarditis, you can get, long haul typhoid effects, but hey, I'm fine.
Yeah. Dr. Malone.
I want to reach out and give her a hug.
I know. Isn't she amazing?
I particularly appreciate the comments about the pediatric cohort, which is near and dear to my heart since I'm medical and regulatory director for the Unity Project. I've got to say, I want to get Aditi on my podcast and pick her brain more and get her to talk more about pediatric immunology, because this is a crucial issue that she's raising about what makes it so that our youth can shrug off this virus and our aged have more trouble. And she didn't use the fancy, this is more, sometimes I call it immunobabble, the fancy immunology speak of immunosenescence, which is the way that immunologists refer to this problem of the loss of adaptive effectiveness of the elderly over time. It's a great conundrum that drives the mortality of influenza in the elderly. It's probably a big part of what's driving the mortality with this RNA respiratory virus. So, flu is an RNA respiratory virus, so is this coronavirus. And it's, again, another thing that gently said our leadership doesn't feel it useful to acknowledge, choosing my words. So it does put us in a position of wondering if Dr. Fauci is in fact an immunologist and not just a bureaucrat masquerading as a scientist. That was a leading statement. Then why is he ignoring the fundamentals of immunology? And by the way, ignoring the fundamentals of bioethics, as Matt Memoli recently pointed out on December 1st with his bold debate on the bioethics of mandates. Matt being a card-carrying senior virologist and clinical trial specialist focused in viral disease clinical trials and at the NIH. So he reports up the chain to Tony, but he sent a letter in saying this isn't right, these mandates, which again was, we have a lot of scientists that aren't being very brave. And then we have a few. I'd like to share a story along those lines, just to give Aditi some comfort. I had a phone call the other day. I was down in Louisiana. We testified with Bobby in front of the Louisiana legislature, and we got an overwhelming bipartisan vote against the governor's attempts to mandate vaccines for children, which he may now overrule. But after that testimony, I got a call from a Louisiana physician. And he said, and I'm telling this story not about me, but to give Aditi some comfort. So the doc called me. He's a ICU doc, intensive care unit, and he does emergency room. But he found himself increasingly alienated from his hospitalist buddies because he's giving early treatment. And he called me up and he said, among other things, he said, "I really want to thank you for your contributions to medicine." I said, "What contributions? What are you talking about? Thank you very much, but I'm not sure what you mean." Wondering if he was going to be talking about RNA vaccines or something. No, that wasn't what he was talking about at all. He said that medicine has become increasingly lonely for those of us that are doing things to save patients that are not aligned with the dominant narrative. He said, your voice came in at a time that gave me hope and let me know when you started talking about the data and the science, I realized that what I was thinking and experiencing and seeing was correct. And I didn't have to, I wasn't alone. And it gave me courage and comfort to know that others were seeing the same things that I was. And so that's by way not of saying how great I was. It was just a set of circumstances, as you know, that led me to this position, but rather how important it is that people like Aditi speak up, and they may not see it directly, but that is a clear example of medical peers, and I'm hearing it from all over the world, that hear these podcasts, hear these statements of respected scientists like Aditi speaking truth, and it gives them comfort and courage to be able to continue in the face of all of the misrepresentations that are going on and to stand their ground. And so I just, again, I want to honor what she's doing and just express, my profound appreciation for her courage in speaking her truth.
Dr. Bhargava, and
Well, thank you. It would be, not quite so possible without all of us, right? So you, Dr. Malone, you spoke out, and it took me time to come out with it. I was obviously very, very frustrated and disappointed the way it was going. And my husband said to me, "Why don't you start writing blogs? Take it, get your energy and steam sort of pent up out over there." So I guess we have our ways of coping, but it is actually very distressing to hear from so many people now after Aubrey's podcast. I get mails from all over the world where people have been vaccine injured and they are completely isolated. So what a paradox, right? I mean, if they're vaccine injured, they're not anti-vaccines, anti-vaxxers. They took the vaccine. Now they have side effects. And instead of recognizing that, instead of saying we need to hit the pause button to see what's going on, and it seems like these severe adverse events are only happening with the non-traditional vaccines, right? So I haven't seen either in the Thai study or any other study where they've used either the Coronavac or the inactivated Covaxin, these kind of severe side effects that are now associated with Pfizer, Moderna, and I guess AstraZeneca, J&J, who are using adenovirus, which is another problem, of course, which I mentioned briefly. So what about these people? Like, how do we take care of them? And a lot of them are having anxiety, like mental trauma. How do we excuse ourselves from this? Where are our ethical and moral obligations? Is to, they took the bullet for doing the social good, and now they're being cast as social pariahs, which is like completely mind-boggling. And I feel, and that's where people need to come together to help support people like this. We cannot ignore them. It's just like the veterans, right? They do this service for us, and then if they come back either mentally traumatized or physically maimed, then they're left. I mean, I came to this country to do my postdoc, and to see, one of the things that was shocking to me was to find so many veterans as homeless people. And it's things like that just don't sometimes don't make sense to me. But I guess nature is cruel, and so is society.
If we allow it to be that way, we are all active participants in this, and we can do our part so that it is not as cruel. And Dr. Malone, just as an aside, out of respect for your time, I know you said you had to run. I don't want to keep you hostage. I can, as you know, I can talk for 11 hours. Dr. Bhargava and I went for 3 hours last night. So I want to give you an out if you would like. If you would love to keep talking, that would be the best thing ever. But I just want to give you an out.
I do have to jump,
okay.
And regrettably so. And I hope that Dr. Bhargava and I have an opportunity to again converse, particularly focused on the pediatric, and perhaps do it through the Unity Project. I invite her to join Unity Project at unityprojectonline.com. And it's California-based. It's about the mandates and the pediatric mandates. And I'd just like to also close by echoing her comments. What we've done is gaslight the damaged. It is obscene. We've done it in so many different ways, through Facebook deleting the groups that have been set up for vaccine damage to speak with each other. There's an official government position of denialism about it. And I think that this is another facet of what's happened here that we're going to have to come to terms with at some point, as she points out. And an event rate of 1 in 2,700 boys, let that sink in, will develop clinical myocarditis according to the Hong Kong data. Okay. And that is only one of the adverse events, and it may well be that neuropathies occur more frequently than the myocarditis. So, may occur more frequently in girls. So we, instead of being data-based and science-based, for political reasons, there seems to be an attempt to deny, and this is not the path to good public policy for public health. I'm seeing it play out in state houses and in the federal government, and there's going to come a reckoning. There's going to come a reckoning. I did a podcast with a pediatric psychiatrist that spoke about the damage to our children that's going on from the mask mandates and the school shutdowns and the bullying that's going on in schools if you're not vaccinated, and all of this. There's been a 20-point IQ drop in children that are developing at young ages through this, and major evidence of developmental delays in things like speech and cognition. This is going to last for decades, and you're going to raise a cohort of children. Again, I'm going I'm going to get a little bit political, where the state has inserted itself into the family, and those children will know that they have colleagues that have been vaccine damaged, but the state has told them they have to take the jab. They have all kinds of psychological complexities now, where they're feeling guilty if they haven't been jabbed, because they're putting their parents or their grandparents at risk, which is not valid. Most of the transmission occurs vertically from adults to children, not the other way around. There is a huge basket of neuropsychiatric damage that's going on here that is not being recognized, and we are going to have to live with the consequences for decades.
And
this must stop.
yes, and I will have to keep you for another 2 minutes for this, because I can't go a podcast without making an analogy. But talking about, right, I mean, this is just a podcast that I'm doing from an apartment. I mean, my bed is 4 feet that way, my washer machine is 6 feet that way. Dr. Malone, you're free to consult, right? I'm free to do whatever I want. And Dr. Bhargava, your courage in speaking up as someone who still holds an academic position, I don't need to explain it to you both, but you remember organic chemistry, and I used this analogy just yesterday, I think. Solutes and solvents and precipitates. But what do you do in organic chemistry? My favorite class, but I hated the lab. But one thing I remember is when you have the beaker and you're super saturating it, but there's no precipitate forming, what do? You get that little blue, it looks like a mini guitar pick, a little plastic chip, and it's a point of nucleation. And you put it down there so just a couple things can touch. And it's very important, because once it starts forming, it no longer needs the point of nucleation. The chip can be thrown away, the process is started, and this super saturated solution goes from a clear beaker to all of a sudden you got this chunk of crystal in it. And what it matters is there's 7 billion people here. Everyone is being touched by this. Everyone is being forced or being made to feel guilty about not getting the vaccine, or I haven't gotten it and I'm a terrible person for it, right? But there are so many people that feel like everything we're talking about in this podcast. And another side is the media is never going to broadcast that. They're never going to say, hey, the narrative's falling apart. They're going to hold up that narrative until all of a sudden it collapses. Like I used yesterday, the World Trade Centers were on fire for 102 minutes, and then they collapsed. The Soviet Union was falling apart for 2 decades, and it seemingly collapsed. A tsunami goes across the ocean, 99% of its lifetime, it's just a mound on the horizon, and then it connects with the earth. Be a point of nucleation. Be a force of, it doesn't take any courage for me to do this. I love doing this podcast. Dr. Malone, consultant, facial hair connoisseur, he gets to do this. Dr. Bhargava, you are showing courage. And when you do that, I can see Dr. Malone's face lighting up just how you're talking. And that's just one connection. That's just one little lightning bolt. What other physician or academic physician or doctor or researcher or whatever in the middle of Montana or in the middle of Uruguay, who's going to see this and go, okay, yeah, I can do this too. Be that part. And this is not because you're both obviously doing it. You're here. Everyone listening, if you're in a position to do this, it is your duty to stand up and do something. I'm not saying it's time to join the no, get on YouTube, get banned from YouTube, get on Rumble, and just start talking about it. Use your credentials. Don't gun the other side. Don't drive it down their throats. Just point out what we all know is right. Truly trust the science, and that science can never be trusted. It's you always breaking it down. Right now, we think we have it all figured out. In 10 years, we're going to look back with quantum mechanics and be like, oh, we thought we had it figured out. It goes on forever. Just be a point of nucleation. Be a point of courage. Don't try to win anything. Don't try to, I conquered you. Open your mind, speak your truth, and do it with good intentions. And perhaps this is the optimist in me. I truly believe that things will come out better on the other side. Only if we stand up, we get what we deserve. So, Dr. Bhargava, thank you so much. Dr. Malone, thank you so much. I will put you two in touch in an email thread, and I hope you guys do a million more podcasts. You guys are wonderful together. Dr. Malone, I am going to harass you later today to have you tweet this episode. But final words from Dr. Bhargava.
Don't make science sound bites and press releases. Don't make that. That's the worst you can do.
Dr. Malone.
What do I say in closure? The real sickness is that we are all isolated. We've allowed ourselves to become isolated. That's what's driving the mass formation psychosis, which is behind this problem that you're talking about. And the real sickness is what's happened to us in society. We've lost our connections, and we have to find community again. We have to find dignity, and we have to find integrity. Those are three key words: community, integrity, and dignity. And somehow we have to restore those if we want to become healthy again as a culture. And with that, I have one American news that I got to jump to. Thank you all.
Thank you both so much. God bless. Take care, everyone. Stay